3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to Rugby League Fanfare, brought to you by the International Rugby League Supporters Federation. My name's Rob Corra. I'm your host for this, our May 2023 edition. And in this program, when people hear about rugby league in Canada, they immediately think of the Toronto Wolfpack and the tremendous success they had in the English rugby league. But there's more to rugby league in Canada than the Wolfpack. And to find out more, we're going to speak to Avery Lewis McDougall, who's the host of Avery's Sports Show. So, Avery, welcome to Rugby League Fanfare.
Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure having me on. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for reaching out to have me on the podcast.
No problems. Now, Avery, I just wanted to begin with, I'm interested to know how you became a rugby league supporter. How did you become interested in rugby league?
Oh, that is an interesting question. So I would say it went back to, around 2016 when the Toronto Wolfpack were first launch. And to give people some context, I've worked in sports media for 15 years. I've worked in literally anything and everything. I've worked in basketball, soccer, baseball, track and field. I've worked for a variety of outlets. And I was living in Toronto at the time, and I heard about the Toronto Wolfpack. I heard this guy, Eric Perez, wants to launch a rugby league team in the UK system. I thought, that's a little bit different. How are you going to pull off a team being based in Canada, playing in the UK rugby league system? I did my research on league and what he was doing. And really, to be honest with you, Rob, in Canada, for the most part, when we hear rugby, it is union. That's what we know rugby as. Most Canadians don't know there's two different codes. And I knew there were two different codes, but I didn't really know much about NRL or rugby league in 2016. So I did my homework, did research, everything. I thought, this is a much more exciting form of rugby. Like I've worked in union before. I've covered union and sevens and the Canadian national team. But watching league, I thought, wow, this is similar to gridiron football, similar to the NFL, the CFL, of course, how the game works. So I started doing YouTube videos on the Wolfpack on my YouTube channel to educate people on rugby league, what this team was. And from there on, the team launched, of course, 2017. Yep. In the lower divisions of the UK system. And I started doing YouTube videos on the Wolfpack's games in England. I went to the first game in Toronto. I covered that. And I realized that, there was an audience for people who want to hear a Canadian talking about rugby league. So I got much more invested in rugby league, Super League, NRL. I became a South Sydney fan. I started doing stuff on league. So it really came from me wanting to create content and wanting to see if there was a platform on YouTube for a Canadian talking about the Wolfpack.
All right. So just talking about rugby league, then I'm going to get onto the Wolfpack a bit later on, but I just wanted to talk quickly about rugby league in Canada, the domestic competition. So from what I've discovered, there's 3 different rugby league competitions in Canada. Is that the case?
Yes, there's competitions in Ontario, BC, and Alberta. The more active ones right now are in Ontario and BC. Ontario is wrapping up their competition. Ontario, of course, COVID put a wrench into much of the progress that was made over the past few years here. Right now, Ontario's restarted their competition, and they wrapped up just now. They've got teams in Toronto, the Toronto City Saints, which is one of the oldest rugby league teams in the country. They've been playing since 2010. There's teams in Brampton. There's teams where a few more teams in Ontario. And when you go to Alberta was much larger before COVID hit. So there's no real the competition hasn't really started up again in Alberta since COVID. The Alberta Broncos were the provincial team, and that was for women's rugby league. That was our provincial competition, and players came out of Alberta to represent Canada and to have our own state of origin event, which is going to happen again this year. It was launched originally in 2019. The first game happened, early 2020. It happened in Toronto. That was played in Lamport Stadium. And then BC is just starting up now, and BC is, I would say BC is a little more active. They have more teams there. The Vancouver Dragons are probably the most active team you'll find on social media. They have a pretty good nines tournament that they just wrapped up. BC has taken, I would say, the lead in terms of being more active, letting people know, hey, this is what we're doing. We're trying to get Rugby League post Wolfpack going up, back active again. But yeah, those are the really three competitions. And I would say the one you want to pay attention to right now is BC, because they're starting up again for this year, and they've got teams literally all over the province of British Columbia right now.
All right. So the competitions run from, so the competitions, the actual season runs at different times in different through these different leagues. So Ontario, you said there, that competition is just about to finish up, whereas British Columbia is just about to, the British Columbia Rugby Leagues are just about to start their season. That's what you're saying?
Exactly, that's correct. Yeah, they're just starting. Sorry, go ahead, Rob. Yeah.
All right, because I suppose you're going into your summer now. It's sort of a summer sport in Canada.
That's correct. Yes, Rugby League is a summer sport. I know it's more of a winter sport down in Australia, but yes, Rugby League is a much more summer game up here.
All right. So, and you just said there before. Now, I was interested to know if, clubs from the different leagues played against each other. But you're saying now that there's some sort of state of origin type competition. Is that what you said there earlier on?
Mm-hmm, yeah. So there's no real crossing over of leagues, separate teams playing each other. Like, you won't really see the Toronto City Saints playing, say, the Vancouver Valley Vipers or the Vancouver Dragons. But you will see now, what's starting in Canada now is we're starting to get the best players of Western Canada taking on the best players of Eastern Canada, and that's starting to get some legs now in Canada. It was launched, I mentioned, in early 2020 before COVID hit. That was played in January, and it had a pretty good turnout, I thought, for the first attempt at a Canadian version of State of Origin. Okay.
So that's sort of the Canadian State of Origin, East versus West.
Correct.
Okay. And these competitions, are there any junior sort of competitions attached to the the various leagues, junior competitions, or some sort of development leagues involved with any of the major competitions?
As of right now, that I know of right now, I know that is the goal for a lot of these teams to eventually get into that and to try and get union players over to a league. Right now, there's more Masters events, which is players 35 and older who take part, but junior competitions, I think, are still a little bit of ways away, because it's still trying to get kids and everybody else learning what league is compared to union. Yes. So I don't think there's anything really happening right now, not yet, but over the past few years here, there's been discussions of trying to get a junior program going more and getting that involved in the hands of kids in elementary schools and junior high, so we can develop a junior program across the country.
Yeah, okay. All right. So now in the introduction there, we spoke about the Toronto Wolfpack, and the Wolfpack came into existence, as you said, in 2017. So what was the impact of rugby on rugby league in Canada when the Wolfpack arrived?
The impact, I would say it really was the one thing that the Wolfpack came out of the gate doing was they wanted to compete and win early, and they knew that they had to find a way to attract an audience early. So they played in what's known as Lamport Stadium. It's a downtown arena in downtown Toronto. Yeah. It seats 9,000 fans. You can get there by a car, by public transit. It's a very hip, very young part of the city that they played in for the matches there, and their marketing was very well. Eric Perez did hits on multiple TV channels up here. You saw him on TV, radio, podcast. He was very accessible, and so were the players. The players were at events all over the city. You saw players at Toronto Blue Jay baseball games, Toronto Raptor NBA games. They wanted to say, hey, to get an impact, yes, we have to win. We also have to let Canadians know who we are exactly, why they should care about us. So the community impact from day one was massive. And then they went into the third tier of English rugby, and they won. And they kept winning. And they won. They got promoted. And they made rugby league like a party atmosphere. They treated rugby league how like you would see a basketball game, like an NBL game where it's noise, it's fun, it's environment. They rejected old ways of sitting down and just simply about a game. They made sure that you felt like you were part of this team, and they got a lot of attention for how, I guess, irreverent in the sense they were compared to most rugby league teams with their approach and the fact that they were unapologetic about winning and rolling through these different leagues to gain promotion.
All right. And, well, you mentioned Eric Perez there. I mean, because he must be some sort of very big rugby league fan, because well, not only just to get a team into the English Rugby League, but there were various conditions, applied to this entry. I mean, flying teams from England to Canada for the Wolfpack's home games. He must. Can you tell us anything a bit more about Eric Perez?
I would say he's from Ontario, but at times he could be a little quiet. Like we knew the basics of what he was. Businessman from Ontario. He moved to, I believe it was Gibraltar. He lived there and he got into rugby league, living over in Europe, and thinking that basically his story was he saw it on TV and thought, this could be a thing that I could bring to Canada and Canadians could like. And he actually well before 2016, 2017 had tried to bring rugby league to Canada with Super League. Like the original plan was to try and bring Super League straight to Toronto, no promotion, no starting in third division, and that was shot down immediately. So he realized, you know what, I'm going to give it a few years, circle back and say, okay, what if I have a team and we try and start at the lower levels and work our way up. Yes. And for the Rugby League Football League system, that was something that they felt was more palatable to bring in. And of course, he partnered with David Argyle, who is Australian himself, to help fund the team as well. Okay. And Eric Perez, and unfortunately, the conditions that are put on them, they accepted, because there are some conditions that said, for example, you have to, you're going to pay for the travel. They offered to pay for travel of teams to Canada. They accepted not taking television money from Sky, which unfortunately was a major thing, was a major issue that happened later on for the franchise. But Eric Perez is someone, like, he really saw a vision of rugby league being a thing that Canadians would like, simply because how fast-paced it was, how similar the gameplay was to gridiron football, and how it was something new, and he felt that it could build a fan base among younger residents in the city.
Yes, okay. Avery, what are the Wolfpack doing now? Are the Wolfpack playing in any competitions? Or what are they doing now, the Wolfpack?
Oh, boy, that's an interesting thing. So the Wolfpack, as it stands right now, the Wolfpack, this will get a little bit weird. So the Wolfpack, what we know, the former team Wolfpack, the one that was owned by Eric Perez and David Argyle, their assets, their IP has been sold to a group that we know only as Team Wolfpack. We don't know who it is. They've not revealed themselves. They've not said who they are. Even that, I've tried to figure out who exactly this is. They've not replied to emails. They've not replied to messages. They held a game in 2021 against DC. Yeah. And it was one game. And they had a little bit of attention, but that was it. And then they went radio silent for almost a year. They came back and tried to launch North American Rugby League, which played no formal league games before that league went under. So in 2023, we sit here right now, the Wolfpack have resurfaced on Twitter. Whoever owns the intellectual property has tweeted and said that we are going to play this summer 10 games against various teams across North America. We don't know what dates are. We don't know who the players are. We don't know many things. And really, Rob, a lot of people in Canada and Toronto are frustrated because after COVID, they were first, of course, they saw the team go away after the Super League fiasco. After 2021, they assumed it would be a more permanent return. They got silence back. So really right now, there's no proper competition for the Wolfpack to be in. And most Wolfpack fans right now are sick of being teased. They just want answers, and they want the Wolfpack to say, don't say anything until every single detail is available. And right now, Rob, we don't know. There's so many question marks in terms of what they're going to do right now.
So, it sounds from what you've just said there that what they're going to try and start their own competition. Is that what they're trying to do? They're going to start up their own competition, the Toronto Wolfpack.
It's honestly, you're right, Rob. It sounds like it. From what that tweet said on their Twitter page, it sounds like that's their approach. They're going to attempt to do their own thing, but there's so little info available that people really don't know what that really means.
Okay, yes, all right. And is there any? I mean, obviously, people like Eric Perez was an incredible sponsor of the game. I mean, just generally, are the various competitions sponsored by anybody, or the clubs? Do the clubs get sponsorship? Do you know anything about that?
As far as I know, some of the competitions do have local sponsors, but they're not really at the level of what the Wolfpack are. They're still very amateur. They're all the competitions in Canada right now. They're all amateur competitions, none are professional. So the sponsors right now aren't as big as what the Wolfpack had. But they do have some local support though between all three competitions, Rob.
Okay, all right. And the media coverage, I suppose, how would you describe the media coverage?
I would say post Wolfpack, to be honest with you, it really isn't that much because when the Wolfpack were here, they educated people on what the game was, be it the major networks, major channels, newspapers, podcasts. Once Wolfpack left, it went back to going under. It went back into the shadows, in which if you know the sport, you'd be a diehard to want to follow it. So really, there's no real coverage here. I mean, the Toronto Saints, they've done a few podcast hits here and there, but these teams don't really have any coverage on TV, radio, or mainstream news here because it's gone back to the days of when people didn't know what rugby league was or didn't know the difference between league or union, or they don't know these players, these teams. So unfortunately, beyond myself doing podcasting work, the media coverage in Canada is pretty minuscule.
Okay, all right. Avery, I just wanted to speak about the international game. And of course, we're all hoping the next World Cup will go ahead as planned in 2025, but I'm going to have something to say about that a bit later in the show. The Canadian women's team, the Ravens, they have qualified for the next World Cup. Okay, they were one of the automatic qualifiers for the tournament, and I was very interested to see that a Canadian player, Ferris Sandbo, has joined St George Illawarra for this year's National Rugby League women's competition. So I just wondered what your thoughts about that, a Canadian player coming to the NRLW.
I think it's amazing. I think it's wonderful. She's from Grand Prairie, Alberta, which is a few hours away from my hometown, Edmonton. I think that's amazing to see her there. She played in the World Cup for Canada. She comes from a background of playing union. She wrestled. I think that's amazing. And we talk about wanting to grow the game more, getting more people from different nations involved in the game. I think it's amazing to have her be that first Canadian to really make an impact and be on a developmental deal for NRLW. And I hope that she's the first of many to join NRLW clubs, Rob.
Yes, you would think. Well, do you know, are there other Canadian players who are trying to sort of come to Australia? Because the women's competition this year has increased. There are another 2 teams this year. And I just sort of thought that, Ferris has made the move. I mean, I understand it must be a fairly big move because I don't know her marital situation or her work situation, but she's virtually sort of uprooted and come to live here in Sydney, or I think she's living down in Wollongong, actually. Do you know of other players that might be interested? It's a big move for her to come over here.
I know there are some who tried to play. I know there are some who are who do play in England. But as far as Australia, I'm not sure if anyone anymore who are trying to play in NRLW. I'm sure it'll change eventually. And the more we do have Canada Ravens players playing international league in events like in the World Cup, but I think it's a thing that will hopefully get hopefully we'll see more after 2025, Rob.
All right. And the men's team, the Wolverines, they are in the American qualifying group. And remember that American qualifying group, that two teams will go through from this group. But Avery, they're in a group there with Brazil, Jamaica, and the United States. That looks like a fairly difficult group.
It'll be a challenge for them, and of course we saw Jamaica make their debut. So
Yep.
Jamaicans are no slouch. They're a team that's had Super League players before. They're a team that's had a lot of pros. So it'll be a challenge for the men. I know the men didn't make the last World Cup, but I definitely do want to see the Canadians get back in the World Cup. They've been there before in the past, but
Yes.
it's going to be a challenge. But they have found ways before to beat America and beat South American nations, though. So I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's going to be a challenge for Canada to certainly qualify for the next World Cup, Rob.
Yes, I know that Canada's had quite a bit of success against the Americans, the United States, in the I think they call it the Colonial Cup or something. They have beaten the United States quite a few times, so that's a positive indication. But it looks like a very tough group for them. Finally, Avery, I just wondered if you could get your thoughts on the future of rugby league in Canada. Where do you reckon the game is going in Canada?
I would say compared to when I first started getting into the game, participation is growing more and more on women's side, the men's side, the masters side. I think if we can get more kids playing rugby league, if we can convert players from union and gridiron football, I think the sport will be in a great place. We saw the development with the Wolfpack. We saw the Wolfpack doing their best to try and get kids interested. We're seeing the Toronto City Saints coming back to play at Lamport Stadium. We're seeing the BC competition starting up. There is more education now for the general public than there was, I would say, 8-9 years ago. Because the Wolfpack helped things a lot because they were so prominent and they were on global platforms. So I think rugby league, even though there's no more Wolfpack, I still think the game is in a great place with the growth of our women's teams and amateur competitions. And I think we're gonna definitely see more players wanting to play league and getting a few more converts away from union.
All right, Avery. Thanks very much for joining us here on Rugby League Fanfare.
Hey, you're very welcome.
Okay, and a big thank you to Avery for giving us an insight into rugby league in Canada. Now, to other events in international rugby league, and obviously the biggest news is that France has pulled out of hosting the 2002 Rugby League World Cup. And, this is a terrible decision for international rugby league, especially after the success of the last World Cup. I've got to say that as soon as I heard about this, my first thoughts was about Mike Relance's famous book, The Forbidden Game. The French are saying that there was a failure to meet certain financial criteria outlined by the government. The government wanted financial guarantees to cover the risk of losses, and that guarantee was apparently 10 million euros, which, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, 10 million euros is it's a drop in the ocean compared to the money being spent on the Rugby Union World Cup, which is being held in France later this year. It's a drop in the ocean compared to the money the government is spending on the Olympic Games. Remember that the 2024 Olympic Games are being held in France, and that those games, the Olympic Games, it's already $500 million over budget. The Olympics are $500 million over budget. And they want $10 million guarantee for the Rugby League World Cup. So, I think the French government is, pulling a very long bow with their reasons for pulling out of the tournament. Of course, now there is some doubt about whether the next World Cup will be played in 2025. It was a very short turnaround already because you'll remember that the NRL cancelled the 2021 World Cup. I'm told that these World Cups, these are big international events, they can take between 5 to 7 years to properly organise. So whether the next World Cup is played in 2025 must be in some doubt. Of course, where will the next World Cup be played? Well, I suppose if there is one positive to come out of this situation, and that is that a lot of countries have put their hands up to host the tournament, including Qatar. Qatar want to host the Rugby League World Cup. South Africa are interested. Fiji, and probably the most prominent bidder is New Zealand. So there's some very big decisions to be made by the international board. But as I said earlier, this decision by the French is a very bad decision for international rugby league. My first thoughts, of course, went to Mike Relance's famous book, but I also thought about another famous French invention, the guillotine. The guillotine, because I think the guillotine would have come in very handy in this situation. Now, last month you'll remember that we also spoke to Charles Carlson from the Cook Islands Rugby League, and they were entering the final stages of the 2023 Premiership. Well, the grand final has been played and won by the Ararangi Bears. The Bears defeated the Tupapa Panthers by 28 points to 23. It's the second premiership for the Bears. 20 years since they last won the title. And, they did it in some style because they also won the women's grand final. The Lady Bears defeated the Panthers in that grand final as well. They defeated the Panthers 28 to 16. So congratulations to the Ararangi Bears, their second premiership in the Cook Islands. It was also a big day for the Aviatu Eels. They had a big day in the juniors because they won the under-19s and the under-16s grand finals. Also, news from the Cook Islands. Again, you might remember that we spoke to Charles about the upcoming Pacific Games, upcoming Pacific Games to be held in the Solomon Islands. A tri-series has been organised between the Cook Islands, Fiji and Samoa. That tri-series is actually being played out at present, I think. But, that series will be a good sort of warm-up tournament for the Pacific Games later in the year. Obviously, the teams will be made up of residential players, but there is also talk that there may be a test series later in the year. A test series, another tri-series between Cook Islands, Fiji and Samoa, and that tri-series will probably involve some of the overseas players. So we'll keep an eye out for that one. Now, it's also been a very big month for Serbia. Okay, they've played a couple of international matches in the last month and they've had some very big wins. Firstly, against Greece. Remember that Greece played in the last World Cup. Obviously, these matches only involve the residential players, but Serbia defeated Greece by 40 points to 6. 40 to 6. It was 12-6 at half time, but the Serbs ran away with the match in the second half. And I'll tell you who did a lot of running. It was the Serbian winger, Alexander Pavlovic. He scored a hat-trick of tries, but his efforts were overshadowed by his teammate, fullback Dragan Jankovic, in the match against Italy, because Dragan scored 5 tries as Serbia defeated Italy by 52 points to 4. 52 to 4. So the Serbs with 2 big wins. Don't forget that Serbia are involved in those European qualifiers for the next World Cup whenever and wherever it's going to be held. That's about all we have time for you this month. We hope you've enjoyed the show. In the meantime, You've been listening to Rugby League Fanfare, brought to you by the International Rugby League Supporters Federation. My name's Rob Corra. On behalf of President Bob Brown, this program was recorded in the studios of Undercover Music. Your producer is Lachlan McLean. Until next month, may the Force be with you.
No regrets, Coyote. We just come from such different sets of circumstance. I'm up all night in the studios and you're up early on your ranch. You'll be brushing out a broodmare's tail while the sun is ascending, and I'll just be getting home with my reel-to-reel. There's no comprehending just how close to the bone and the skin and the eyes and the lips you can get, and still feel so alone, and still feel related, like stations in some relay. You're not a hit-and-run driver, no, racing away. You just picked up a hitcher, prisoner of the white lines on the freeway. Saw a farmhouse burning down in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night. We rolled right past that tragedy till we turned into some roadhouse lights where a local band was playing. Locals were up kicking and shaking on the floor. The next thing I know, that coyote's at my door. He pins me in a corner and he won't take no. He drags me out on the dance floor and we're dancing close and slow. Now he's got a woman at home, he's got another woman down the hall. He seems to want me anyway. Why'd you have to get so drunk and leave me on that way? You just picked up a hitcher, a prisoner out the white lines on the freeway. Coyote right in the face on the road to Baljenny near my old hometown. He went running through the whisker weed, chasing some prize down, and a hawk was playing with him. Coyote was jumping straight up and making passes, and those same eyes just like yours under your dark glasses, privately probing the public rooms, peeking through keyholes in numbered doors, where the players lick their wounds and take their temporary lovers and their pills and powders to get them through this passion play. No regrets, Coyote, I'd just get off up a ways. You just picked up a hitcher, a prisoner on the white lines on the freeway. Coffee shop, he's staring a hole in his scrambled eggs. He picks up my scent on his fingers while he's watching the waitresses' legs. He's too far from the Bay of Fundy, from Appaloosas and eagles and tides, and the air-conditioned cubicles and the carbon ribbon rides are spelling it out so clear. Either he's gonna have to stand and fight or take off out of here. I tried to run away myself, to run away and wrestle with my ego, with this flame you put here in this Eskimo, in this hitcher, in this prisoner.